Tonight, landslide. The new numbers showing the presidential election may not be that close after all. Who switched sides and raised the stakes for next week's debate? The Saudi smoking gun.
Capital time is 6 p.m.
Does this new video prove Saudi intelligence helped the 9/11 hijackers? We expose who is protecting the kingdom. And home run, the life lesson that goes far beyond the baseball diamond.
If I couldn't eat in the place, nobody would eat. We'd get food to travel. If I couldn't stay in a hotel, they'd drive to the next hotel and find a place where I could stay.
Welcome to the fairest show on television. And to be fair, the presidential race, the race for the White House, has never been tighter. 1 week from tonight, we'll dissect the most watched, discussed, anticipated presidential debate in history. In some ways, the race has never been closer. You could not really have an average of polls, the real clear average of polls. 45.5% Joe Biden, 46% for Donald Trump. That is what we would call a statistical dead heat. But today we learned that Trump trounced Joe Biden in fundraising. We're going to put that number up right now. Fundraising during May was incredible, especially on the 2 days that things went against Donald Trump. Trump assessed his civil penalty and then convicted in the hush money trial. Both of those days were more than $10 million hauls. So the big Biden money advantage, that is gone. Something else is gone, or something else we should say is happening. In states that Joe Biden won by big numbers like New York, well, Donald Trump is now down 8 points. Trump has seen a surge of black, Jewish, and Latino voters. To put this in perspective, Donald Trump lost New York by 23 points 4 years ago. This leaves open the possibility, at least, of a landslide. The only thing Republicans and Democrats agree on right now is the debate. President Biden is taking the next 6 days off from public events to prepare. Trump holds a rally tomorrow in Philadelphia. We put up the Pennsylvania polling. This was a state that is a must-win for both sides. It was a state Joe Biden won last time. Donald Trump won in 2016. Right there, Trump now leads there by about an average of 2 points. No surprise, it is Joe Biden's favorite place to go for campaign stops. This is the earliest presidential debate in history, which means we can finally start talking about what matters. Not the polls across America, but the swing state polls. We are going to switch our view to the Electoral College map and bring in Chris Cillizza, former roll call White House correspondent, longtime political analyst. Welcome. Great.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
As they say in radio, okay, longtime listener, first time caller.
I love it.
All right, there we go. DDHQ polling model, our model, shows Donald Trump with about a 10% advantage in terms of possibility to win. The Economist says he has a 2/3 chance to win. The betting markets give him a significant advantage. Obviously, the forecast that we have up there right now gives him an advantage as well. Does that mean that Donald Trump has the most to lose?
No. And I know that may be slightly counterintuitive, but look, there's a reason that Joe Biden agreed to a debate on June 27th, right? And the reason for it is relatively simple, I think. Joe Biden and Biden's team know that they need to find ways, or a very high-profile way, to put down the idea that he is too old to be president, that he is not competent to be president. And so for me, you kind of know what you're going to get with Donald Trump in a debate, or really any setting, but definitely in a debate, right? He's going to talk a lot. He's going to interrupt. He's going to do all those things. The question for me really is, there'll be more eyes on Biden. Does he look up to it? Does he look too old? And again, what's hard about that is those are somewhat subjective measures, right? It's not like, oh, can he fit 50 words in a minute? And we say, oh, he didn't make it or he did make it. Everybody looks different to each person. So I actually think there's more pressure on Biden to display an ability, like he did in the State of the Union, to display an ability that he's up to the job. Because I think a lot of people are concerned he's not.
Well, there's no question. And we see that, right, in the polling. There's about a 20-point gap between Biden and Trump in this. If we just fill this in terms of the polling averages, Virginia right now, I put as a toss-up in North Carolina as well. If Virginia is truly in play in this map, that portends well for Donald Trump.
Absolutely. And I would say my view is if Virginia's a toss-up, then North Carolina isn't, and I'll explain to you why. If Virginia was for a very long time a Republican state. It has since gone more to Democrats, but there is data out there that suggests it's.
So this is the Virginia polling that
right.
shows them tied. I don't believe that, but. Our reporting is that Donald Trump plans his first rally post-debate in Virginia.
And remember, the two most valuable things in the campaign can say, we're going to win California, we're going to win New York. But what really matters is where are they spending money on television and where are they spending the candidates' time, right?
Yep.
So those are the two most valuable assets. So I think that's interesting. The reason I say if Virginia's competitive, that means Donald Trump is running better. To your point that he's running better in these states that were blue. And that probably means North Carolina is off the map. Look, Barack Obama won North Carolina in 2008. He loses it to Mitt Romney in 2012. 2016, Trump wins. 2020, Trump wins. I just don't think that if we're talking about Virginia on election night in terms of being competitive for Trump, he's probably winning North Carolina by 6, 7, 8 points.
All right, so I am now filling this in based on sort of what you've talked about. First time on the program, we'll let you drive the map here sometime in the future. But this now talks about Donald Trump with 315 electoral college votes. That's a landslide. Yeah, so
what I would say is people ask me all the time, when they know you cover politics for a living, I'm sure you have this, they say, well, who's going to win? And I always say, look, I don't know who's going to win. I'd be, gambling on it if I didn't know who's going to win. But the truth is, Donald Trump has a lot more paths to 270 plus votes than does Joe Biden. I always remind people, look, if Joe Biden loses Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia, okay, he won those three in 2020. Let's say he loses those three. He's behind in all three. If he wins Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, no sure thing, but they're effectively tied, close to tied. If he wins those and he wins the single electoral vote coming out of Nebraska's 2nd district, Nebraska breaks it down by district, you know what number he's at? 270. So he's right at the number if he wins everything that I just talked about, and that's no sure thing. Donald Trump has a lot more paths to
we're putting that we're putting that up right now.
But he just the big takeaway here is, look, Donald Trump has a lot more paths to 270 electoral votes than does Joe Biden. Does that mean that Donald Trump is going to win? No, but to me today, you'd rather be him than Biden.
So the one place that you always would have rather been Joe Biden is when it came to money. And this campaign fundraising graphic that we're going to put up, I think, is so interesting. Raised in May, 85 million Joe Biden, 141 million for Donald Trump. Cash on hand between Trump and the RNC, 171 million versus 157 million. Everything you've just laid out, is Joe Biden now the definitive underdog?
I'm stuck on the word definitive. I would say he is a slight underdog right now, yes. What I would say with the money is, I think the really important thing is the trend line with the money, right? So 2 months ago, we had stories saying, Donald Trump's not going to have enough money. He said Joe Biden's going to outraise him 3-1. Okay, well, that's obviously not going to be the case. The other point about the money that's important is Donald Trump was heavily outspent by Hillary Clinton in 2016. Donald Trump was outspent by around $250 million by Joe Biden in 2020. So if he's financially on par, that's different than he's done before. So what I would say is, I'd rather today be Donald Trump than Joe Biden for a lot of reasons, but the biggest reason, I always come back to the map, right? The biggest reason look, I grew up in Connecticut. There's not going to be a big campaign in Connecticut. If there is, Joe Biden's in deep trouble. We're talking about 6 to 8.
We just put it up there, and we've given him Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Virginia, and it's still 268. 268.
Yes.
If Biden does well in this debate, right? And we'll put up the swing state polling. We'll switch to our other graphic system. If he does well in this debate, where is that going to show up in the polling first? Which states?
Probably people don't like to call it the Rust Belt, but the industrial Midwest, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, Michigan, right? Pennsylvania's not really the Midwest, but Midwestern, at least parts of it.
The western part of Appalachia.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
So that's what I would say. And the reason I say that is because that's where it's closest right now, as this shows. That's where it's closest right now. You're talking about Michigan, 0.4%, Trump, 0.2%, Wisconsin. Those are basically ties. If you see polling, and don't assume that, the debate's on Thursday. Don't assume that if there's a poll in Wisconsin on Friday, it's going to show all this movement. It takes a little bit of time for people to process.
The guy who's not on the stage, who neither campaign really wants, maybe Trump wants him there, Biden certainly doesn't, is RFK Jr.
Yep.
This is RFK talking about the debate. Take a listen.
While I'm flattered to know that President Biden and President Trump are frightened by the prospect of debating me, shutting me out of that debate makes a mockery of democracy. It's not just about trying to silence me as a candidate. It's also an attempt to stifle the ideas that I represent that both of these candidates would rather not talk about.
Okay, except you're not anywhere close to 15% in the polls. You're not on the ballot in states that get you to 270 electoral votes. And to sort of circle this back, he says it's an attempt to stifle the ideas that I represent that both of the candidates would rather not talk about. He had a viewing. There was a moment that RFK had a lot of attention by the national media, and his poll numbers went down.
Yeah, I mean, my sense of RFK Jr.'s support is his last name is Kennedy.
Right.
And remember, lots of people do not follow politics as closely as we do. Okay, so they're like, oh, Kennedy. And people don't like Biden or Trump. A majority of people would prefer to swap those two out if they had their druthers.
Which would say there is a very low bar for a third-party candidate to do well, and he's polling at 4%.
Yeah. I mean, look, I will say, I made the argument in my newsletter. I made the argument that RFK should be included, and let me just tell you why. He did not meet the qualifications. You're 100% right. It was 15% in 4 polls. He had 15% in 3 polls, and he's nowhere close to the 270 electoral votes, no matter what his campaign says. Here's my only argument. And by the way, CNN has every right to set requirements of what you want to do. Right. You know, if you can make the debate or not, that's fine. This is what I'll say. He's at, it depends. I looked at 538. He's at somewhere between 8 and 10% generally in a lot of these national surveys. If he got that, which is a big if, but if he got that, that would be the best showing for a third-party candidate since Ross Perot in 1992. Ross Perot got 18.9% of the vote. Ross Perot in 1996, which we always point to, Ross Perot, he got 8%. So this is way above Nader in 2000. He got 2.7%. In 2020, the third-party candidates got 2.3% combined. There is, I hesitate to say, a constituency for him because I'm not sure that people know what he thinks.
Fair enough.
Yet.
Does he know what he thinks?
I think sort of. I think he. Look,
when the guy's asking you to have George Washington's job and you have to equivocate on that, that doesn't say a lot.
I think he's sort of, I would say he's a guy in search of a message, sort of. That he kind of likes running for president. He likes the attention. He's to the manor born. His last name is Kennedy. He feels like it's a sort of his lineage. If we had 10 people in here who were RFK Jr. supporters, and we asked them separately, not together, we asked them one-on-one, why do you support him? My guess is we get 8.5 different answers. Do you know what I mean?
And most of them would involve he's not Trump or Biden.
I think that would be a part of almost every one of them, yes.
Real quick, we're going to switch the view on the board. I want to get you real quickly on this last thing. Support among New York voters. Overall, we'll switch it back to the other graphic. Support among New York voters. Overall, 47-39, 8-point spread. Among black voters, 59-29. Latino voters, 54-26. Jewish voters, 52-46. In each one of those, Donald Trump is doing 10 points or more better than he was in 2020. Is there a chance, and I say we collectively, of the political media are totally not understanding what is happening in this election?
Always a chance. Because I always remind people, 8 years ago, you couldn't find someone in the media who would say Hillary Clinton was going to lose.
Right.
And she did. The number I would circle there is the 29% among black voters for Trump. Look, the best showing among black voters in modern history for a Republican candidate is Gerald Ford in 1976, and he got 14%. If Trump can come anywhere close to 15, forget 29, I mean, that would be amazing.
Right.
If he can come anywhere close to 15, 16, 17%, that number, keep an eye on that number, because it's not just New York, it's nationally you see that number. If that number rises above 13, 14, 15. Now that's a real problem for Joe Biden's coalition. Like the numbers start to not add up.
Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Virginia, Georgia, We're done.
Just really hard. And again, go back to the map. I know I keep saying this, but that's what matters, right? The map is really hard for Joe Biden. I don't think people realize it enough. Yes, he won Nevada very narrowly, but he won Nevada. Yes, he won Arizona even more narrowly. Yes, he won Georgia. But the polling suggests he's not going to win those places. So if you take those three off the map, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, just to get to 270.
That's where we have it.
Just to get to 270 or 260, right, 268. It's a huge issue, and I think we're not focused enough on that because forget the national polling. What matters is where they are in the states.
And now, with a debate this early, we can start focusing, as you point, on the map, which is what matters.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you. Great having you.
Absolutely.
All right. New video that some say proves Saudi Arabia's involvement in 9/11. Who is keeping the FBI? And there is someone keeping the FBI from telling us the truth. Plus, skinny and happy. The new women's movement brought about by Ozempic. Can it last? Live pictures of Capitol Hill tonight. Newly released an ominous video from 1999. We'll show you that video of Capitol Hill. Could finally link the government of Saudi Arabia to the terror attacks on September 11th, 2001. There's always been a discussion of a missing link, that somehow the Saudis were really involved, Saudi intelligence in particular. The video shows a known Saudi operative canvassing the Capitol and other D.C. monuments months before the attacks. In the video, you can hear Omar al-Bayoumi reference a plan, quote, a plan. You said that in the plan. What's the plan? We don't know. He said the plan while standing just feet from the steps leading up to the Capitol. He also filmed inside the building before security guards removed him from a secure area, telling him he's not allowed to go there. Al-Bayoumi also offered a horrific description of a group of teenagers that just happened to be there at the Capitol when he scouted the area.
They say that our kids are demons. However, these are the demons of the White House.
He was later seen with at least two of the 9/11 hijackers in the weeks leading up to the attacks, meaning the man in the video. Rob D'Amico is here. He was a member of the FBI's hostage rescue team on 9/11, also an FBI special agent. Is this the smoking gun?
I don't know about smoking. It is definitely a gun that has some smoke coming out of it. It's one of those things that they're going to keep denying, that, they're saying is a tourist video. But if you look at the actual words in the video that he's talking about, and he talks about a plan and what he's filming, it's not a tourist video. But a lot of intel officers do filming like that. They did try to make it look like an everyday occurrence. But when you start adding things from the case to the video, then the yellow flags start coming up. His allegiance with two of the hijackers. When he got caught with it, he had a whole bunch of numbers. It was months before the decision was made to where they're going to attack. And I think if you look at it that way, he may not have known the original plan when he was shooting that video. Because when he talks about the plan in the video, he talks about the cars. So if you're thinking about crashing an aircraft into the Capitol, why would cars be in there? But I don't know if they knew the exact plan or if he knew the exact plan that far in advance, if it was only known back in Afghanistan. So I think there's some things that look at it, and it's a civil trial. It's not a criminal. In criminal, I don't think you could prove it. In a civil trial, when it's just a preponderance of the evidence, I think they have a chance to really connect them.
And what you're talking about is the civil trial of the 9/11 victims' families going after the Saudis here. And there's a lot in your answer to break down. I think perhaps he may not even have known the plan himself, because that's how operational security works. You don't tell everybody everything. You certainly don't tell a guy who has the potential to be arrested everything. And you may even give him, say, disinformation, to borrow a word that often happens. Key detail from the 28 pages. These are the 28 pages redacted from the 9/11 Commission report. Prior to September 11th, the FBI apparently did not focus investigative resources on redacted Saudi nationals in the United States due to Saudi Arabia's status as an American ally. But Saudi's more than an American ally, right? There's an enormous amount of money that Riyadh has spent gaining friends in the United States in very important places in both parties. Therefore, do we conclude, because now 23 years later, this still is redacted, that somebody or some buddies is protecting the Saudis?
It's such a tough question. Like, I can't imagine who would be protecting the Saudis at this point. During 9/11, I worked at the Pentagon as a reservist, and I was actually in the FBI. I wasn't supposed to be doing reserve duty, but I was. So I had access to a whole bunch of information. And I think part of the time during that happened, it's like telling you your friend is involved in something you don't want him to be. And I think that's the way a lot of the people in the administration looked at it, when maybe some of this intelligence came up and they had very friendly relations with Saudi Arabia. Oh, no, they couldn't be involved. There's no way they would do that. And then I also think when they maybe got some more intelligence on it, that it was like, wow, that would complicate our response to this. One, on just the politics and conducting the war against terror, but also oil and everything else that it would do, that if the intelligence burden started getting higher, then you really start looking at were they just kind of like shutting their eyes to like, hey, I don't even want to hear that. And I point to how they linked Iraq to 9/11, which anyone in the intelligence community knew. Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11. The Al-Qaeda hated
Yeah, that's
Saddam.
been well documented. I want to play a soundbite real quick from Terry Strada. She's the chair of 9/11 Families United, which is part of the group suing the Saudis. Take a listen.
It's really sad and it's really painful to watch that video and to see Omar al-Bayoumi so proudly casing the U.S. Capitol. It was very creepy to watch. And it just brings back a lot of sadness, but a lot of anger, too. So much anger that this type of evidence has been buried for so long.
It begs the question, right? If the Saudis weren't involved, why bury the evidence? I'll flip it around. It almost defies logic that they wouldn't be involved, right? And maybe not all the way to the king, but that sympathetic members of Saudi intelligence would almost have to have been involved. They would have almost had to have had help in the United States. You've got 15 Saudi nationals who were hijackers. We can either believe that the Saudis were involved or they are just the most horribly incompetent intelligence service in the world.
Absolutely. I think everyone in the intelligence community at the time that was really frank with themselves knew other Saudis were involved. Like you said, did it go up to the king? I don't think so. But when you look at Saudi's intelligence agency involved with Afghanistan in the early war, when we were involved with it, that's where we got a lot of the money. That's how we did a lot of things. They were very supportive of that movement. And I think they kept the ties. And if you don't think Saudis and the intelligence community can run their own things, then you're mistaken. So it just, to me, says, how far up did it go? And then when I think some of this came out, then they started saying, we got to get away from this. And that's when I think as a whole, they started really doing the information operation, saying, hey, we had nothing to do with it, both for liability on the lawsuits that are coming up and the political ramifications.
Yeah, enormous. And the pressure. And there was a lot of reasons for the U.S., as you point out, to protect the Saudis afterwards. Great point in terms of how the Saudis were involved in Afghanistan in the 80s when the U.S. was on the side of the jihadis, of the mujahideen, and then needed Saudi Arabia's help. All right, Rob, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Yeah. Manhattan's district attorney has a justification for dropping charges against the students who tore apart Columbia University. What that is next. And the Ozempic effect. It ended body positivity, like ads like this. It ended these. And Ozempic helps get rich Americans skinny. But it created a far, far worse problem. That problem next. In somewhat predictable news, always on a Friday, right in the middle of summer, the Manhattan District Attorney dropped charges against dozens of protesters who broke into and vandalized Columbia University during the anti-Israel, pro-Hamas protests there. All charges dropped. Rich McHugh covered the takeover when it happened and joins us live from New York City. Hi, Rich.
Hey, Leland. So 46 were arrested originally.
Yeah.
46 were arrested originally. 30 of those charges, 30 of those protesters, students, Their charges, all of those charges were dropped today. 15 more refused to make a deal, a probationary deal, and so they are due back in court late July. That's where it stands now. I just want to remind viewers like how we got here. So April 29th, this is Hamilton Hall right behind me. This is where on April 29th they stormed, the protesters stormed and took over Columbia's Hamilton Hall, breaking windows, barricading themselves inside the building. They were flying the Palestinian flag overhead Hamilton Hall. 20 hours later, that's when NYPD in full riot gear stormed in, as you can see in body camera footage I think we have, stormed in. 29% of those arrested were not students. That means not, like, they were outside agitators. 30 of those charges have been dropped of the 46. Of those charged, James Carlson, who was a New York City police described as a professional agitator, he still faces charges due back in court next month. I spoke with a student here who was also at the hearing, Jessica Schwab. She's been covering this all along. Here's her reaction. Take a look.
It sort of reinforces this feeling like, okay, well, the method to getting away with crime is to do it on Columbia's campus, wear a mask, and cover the security cameras. And eventually the state will just say, okay, we give up.
Now, I just want to note, Leland, the NYPD hasn't put out any official statement. I've talked to my sources that are high up in the NYPD. They are not happy about this one bit.
All right. And obviously there's been a lot of comparisons to the same prosecutor who prosecuted Donald Trump. That's the political side of it. Rich, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Have a great weekend. Eve Magazine just posted a new article. It was entitled, "I'm Happier When I'm Skinny." In it, the author writes, people don't want the truth. They want to feel good about themselves above all else. If that means glorifying obesity, so be it. If that means insulting thin women living healthy, balanced lives out of resentment, so be it. 3 years ago, before the rise in the popularity of weight loss drugs like Ozempic, Mounjaro, Wegovy, Eve Magazine would have been eviscerated for body shaming by the left and by most of the media. Instead, Eve's editor writes, editors from big magazines messaged me privately and thanked us for the article because they all agreed and didn't want to say it. Is this the Ozempic effect? DC correspondent and Unheard, former culture editor at The Federalist, Emily Jashinsky, is here. Emily, good to see you. Is that what it is now, that if you can take a drug and be skinny, suddenly body positivity doesn't matter?
I mean, it's sort of remarkable because we've actually seen certain celebrities who were longtime body positivity champions. Rebel Wilson is one really good example, but there are many others who started taking Ozempic, Wegovy, et cetera. And, they say they can still be, Kelly Clarkson, actually another really good example. So they can still be sort of these champions of body positivity, even though they themselves sort of took the, quote unquote, shortcut route. And, you can be beautiful at whatever size, et cetera, which often translated into you can be healthy at any size. You saw that actually on a lot of magazines for years, like the last decade. This was a really trendy thing to be saying on the pages of those glossy magazines. And it's not surprising that their editors are only saying this in private now to the EV magazine writers, because they've invested so much sort of social justice capital in body positivity. It's hard to walk it back.
Well, the brands are walking it back, right? We've seen Victoria's Secret, the pendulum, has swung full one way and then is now starting to swing back. I think what's interesting, though, people take drugs for all sorts of things. It's hard to understand what's different about taking drugs to be skinny than to lower your cholesterol. As you point out, in the end, for a huge majority of the people, it's about health and makes you a lot healthier if you're skinnier. Top states and cities for searching for Ozempic. States per 100,000, Louisiana, Tennessee, West Virginia. Cities, unsurprisingly, Miami, Atlanta, Minneapolis. I can't believe Los Angeles is not on the list. Maybe they don't have to search for it. They just get it in the water or something out there. But I feel like there's an irony here, right? In that is that the wealthy elite class in these magazines and the editors was the one who pushed body positivity as being great. Now that there's a way for them to be skinny because they can pay for Ozempic at $1,000 a month, suddenly being skinny is back in vogue, and everybody else who can't pay for Ozempic is just left out back in the dark of the 90s and early 2000s view of what is sexy.
No, I think this is a really critical point. It's sort of a disgusting class dynamic when you think about it, because the long time effort to normalize this equation between beauty and health, which are not always overlapping. You can be beautiful at any size without being healthy at any size, actually did normalize for a lot of people feeling comfortable with bodies that certainly were not healthy. And now that they can take a pill to kind of deal with it, because they don't have to worry about whether their insurance will cover it. $1,000 a month, even if your insurance isn't covering it, for a wealthy celebrity is easy. It's much, much, much more difficult for a lot of the people who, by the way, the left likes to talk about food deserts. I'll say as a conservative, I think that is a very real thing. Unhealthy food is a lot cheaper. And so when you're telling people that they can be quote unquote beautiful at any size, and you have the resources to eat healthy, work out because you have a nanny or whatever it is, and then take Ozempic and Wegovy, and you've normalized a state that's unhealthy, you've made people feel more comfortable when their bodies are telling them they shouldn't feel comfortable in that state. It is, I think, a really reprehensible class dynamic.
Yeah, the message, right? If you can't afford it, you're on your own. Emily, I'm so glad you mentioned food deserts. I didn't really understand the concept until I was in Baltimore for the riots and was trying to get some snacks back in the day and figured out what it was really like for people, especially if they didn't have a car, to try and get healthy food for their families. It is a huge issue and one that is not discussed nearly enough. So it means something to bring it up. Thank you.
Thanks, Leland.
Yeah. Have a good weekend. Baseball great Reggie Jackson delivered a searing rebuke of racism in the South during Jim Crow. Why his clearest memories are of the people who helped him.
Had it not been for my white friends, had it not been for a white manager and Rudy, Fingers, and Duncan, and Lee Myers, I would have never made it.
Good field in Birmingham, Alabama. I could care less about the score of the game, didn't even know it was happening. They played the game, two major league teams, in tribute to Willie Mays and the Negro League players. And just before the game, baseball great Reggie Jackson gave a searing and raw view of his life as a young ball player in the South.
I walked into restaurants and they would point at me and said, "The can't eat here." I would go to a hotel and they say, "The can't stay here." We went to Charlie Finley's country club for a welcome home dinner and they pointed me out with the N-word. "He can't come in here."
The interviewers got a little bit more than they bargained for, but it was important to hear. Something else was important to hear. Even before the recitation of racism and indignities visited upon him, and certainly as he talked about what happened to him in those experiences, the only names Jackson mentioned, the thing that seemed to matter the most to Jackson, were the people who stood up for him.
I wouldn't wish it on anyone. At the same time, had it not been for my white friends, had it not been for a white manager and Rudy, Fingers, and Duncan, and Lee Myers, I would have never made it. Fortunately, I had a manager, Johnny McNamara, that if I couldn't eat in the place, nobody would eat. We'd get food to travel.
Jackson's story, of course, is right, a reminder of the evil of Jim Crow and how someone never forgets those who take a stand of moral courage. And that story is repeated throughout history. It's often said that the only thing needed for evil to triumph is for good men and women to do nothing. The more positive view of that, good men and women can change a life, they can save a life, and they can change the world when they stand up to evil. One of my favorite movies of all time, and this is going to sound sappy and silly, is Love Actually. And it's a romantic comedy, fine, but Hugh Grant's opening monologue nailed it.
When the planes hit the Twin Towers, as far as I know, none of the phone calls from the people on board were messages of hate or revenge. They were all messages of love. If you look for it, I've got a sneaky feeling you'll find that love actually is all around.
Yeah. And in the same way, when we remember the awful times, and all of us have had them, often what we remember the most were those who were kindest to us, those who stood up for us, and those that loved us. We first wrote about this in War Notes. That's our free Daily newsletter, every day, 4 p.m. Eastern. It gives you our first look at the most important stories of the day. You can reply. We read them all. And also see you on social media at Leland Vittert. Speaking of replies, Renita writes, I could be wrong, but humor me, please. If Biden wins and the excitement gives him a heart attack and he doesn't survive, Kamala would be president, right? Yes, she would be. But wouldn't Speaker Johnson move to VP? And doesn't VP sit over the Senate? So then GOP would have both houses. There's a lot to unpack here. In short, no. If the president of any party dies in office, the vice president moves up and then gets to pick a new vice president that must be confirmed by a majority of both houses of Congress. The Speaker of the House only becomes president if both the president and vice president die before a new vice president is confirmed. Sheila writes, I'm unsubscribing. This publication is not a balanced, but a sham for the leftist agenda. Sheila, you made my day, and I'll tell you why. Not because you're unsubscribing, but because I keep relative track of the number of people who say they're unsubscribing because we are a left-wing shill and because we are a right-wing rag. And so long as those numbers stay about equal, I feel like I'm doing my job. So I am sorry to see you go, but thanks for writing. Kelly writes, I'm so tired of hearing about Biden's age. Trump is just a couple of years younger and apparently showed enough signs of cognitive decline that he was administered a mental status exam. It's not like you have Biden and a 40-year-old. They're both old. Kelly, yes, they are both old. And the debate will show a lot. Then voters can decide for themselves. Ken writes about my Father's Day story in War Notes. Great story and a great dad. I suspect there's a great mom in that story as well. You were truly born lucky. Keep showing mom and dad it was all worth it. And yes, Ken, a very great mom. She got her own well-deserved tribute on Mother's Day. This is her and I on my last day as a Mideast correspondent. Came home and had lunch with Dad after we flew back from the Middle East. Together, they provide a great role model of what a marriage and a relationship can be. Mom and Dad celebrated 52 years earlier this month. Tony writes about the Father's Day story to say, I'm touched by your personal story and the love you show for your father. The devotion you have for each other is a wonderful thing. I followed you at Fox, was glad to see you landed at NewsNation. You have always been my most favorite journalist. Thoughtful, fair, with intelligence, so keep up the great work. Your standards are high and among the best. All right, Tony, you're now my favorite viewer. Dad taught me a lot. I keep working hard every day to live up to that standard and make him proud. Thank you all. Keep writing in. We'll keep reading them. The future, well, it might be upon us. There are new cyber attacks that will not just cost you money, but can kill you, and have killed Americans just in the past few months. Why you won't see it coming when it comes for you. The newest cyber attacks, hacking, it's not going to leave you poor, it's going to leave you dead. Groups targeting hospitals killed a baby because they cut off access to the fetal heartbeat monitor. In another attack, a woman suffering from low blood sugar and confusion went into cardiac arrest and died after hospital workers said they waited 4 hours for lab results they needed in order to proceed with her care. They never received the results because of a cyber attack. Adjunct professor and cybersecurity chief information security officer at Direct Marketing Solutions, David Malakote, joins us. David, thank you for being here. Is the reason these hackers are attacking hospitals is because they're the ones who are most likely to pay up in ransomware attacks?
Yeah, so due to the life and death nature, what the hackers want to do, they're running a risk evaluation of their own, and they want to go attack folks that are going to pay. They want that money as quickly as possible. So typically, healthcare centers, hospitals, they know that if they get attacked, that they have minutes, hours maybe, to be able to get those things back online before they start running into their own risk equations. So yes, they attack them. The cost of that attack is huge when it comes to value.
And just so everybody understands at the very basic level, ransomware is the hackers go in and they basically lock people out of their computers. So doctors, nurses, whatever, can't access any of the computer systems, and then send a note that says, hey, pay us $5 million or $10 million and we'll turn everything back on. Until then, good luck. These are all coming mostly from Eastern European countries. They're the ones evidently behind this latest. Well, a lot of times, Eastern European,
yes,
Russia,
agreed.
some China. What I'm trying to figure out is that if there were criminal gangs doing this to Americans not via cyberspace, we'd be fighting back. And it doesn't seem like we as a country are fighting back. And why is that?
Well, I don't think we see it. So I do know for a fact that we do have offensive security that's happening from the U.S. government on a daily basis. And unfortunately, what you have is a situation more like, let's say, a hockey goalie, right? So hockey goalies, they take hundreds and hundreds of shots, but those scores are quite low. So 1 or 2 get by. You may still win the game, but in the long run, there's some that get by. In cybersecurity, those that get by, those are the hacks. And so from a ratio perspective, the number of attacks versus the successes is not the same. Like it is cattywampus. And so in the end, that's the thing that gets the press. That's the thing that gets the attention of people, obviously, when life and death is on the line. So in the end, all those attackers have to be is right one time, and they get through, and then you have the situation like you do with Ascension.
No, fair enough. I understand that. And there was just a bunch of car dealerships hacked. The company that provides software for car dealerships is hacked. But money has traces and trails. Mm-hmm. So does Bitcoin and everything else. There's ways to go after these people. And I guess what I'm trying to figure out is why there is not more deterrence from the U.S. government for the governments that are harboring these gangs.
I think there's opportunity on the table for that. I think from what I read and understand, it is a delicate balance. Now, I think it changes from administration to administration. And so you have ones that are maybe a little more aggressive. You have ones that may be a little less aggressive. In the end, I think there is a limited amount. I think that with the FBI recently, I think going after one of the ransomware actors, I believe in Portugal or Spain, they were able to capture one of these. But these are fewer and further between. So ultimately what we get is indictments, but really no recourse by which we can actually go get them if they're in a non-extradition country.
Meantime, if you're in a hospital, who knows what you're going to do. Hey, thank you very much. We appreciate it. Scary in terms of what can happen.
Thank you, Leland.
Good to see you. Thank you very much. We appreciate it. All right, we made it to Friday. Next week is a very big week in American politics. So I have a suggestion. Spend the weekend with some people you love. Put down your phone. Don't talk about politics. I'll see you on Monday night. Here's Chris.